بحضراتكم مشاهدينا من مركز المنارة للمؤتمرات حيث
Manara Conference Center. As in a while we'll witness the inauguration of the Egyptian European Investment Summit. This conference would be inaugurated by President Sisi, the President of the Republic, as well as Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the EU Commission, with a wide participation from all state institutions in Egypt, as well as representatives of the EU, the representatives of employers' organizations, as well as big companies in Egypt and European countries and countries from all over the world. The private sector companies are represented in this conference that is considered to be an important one. This important economic event witnessed by Egypt, held here on the land of Egypt, signifies the weight of Egypt in the whole region and the fact that it is the pillar of stability and security in the region. And this was highlighted through the fact that EU selected Egypt to develop relations with it at the level of strategic partnership through holding this important conference. Of course, the Egyptian-European relations are great, and they have developed over a number of long years in different fields at different levels, economic and commercial. And this conference is under the title Unleashing the Egyptian Capabilities in a Changing World. This title symbolizes what Egypt was able to achieve through its economic reform program over the previous years, in addition to the steps taken by Egypt right now to continue and resume its economic reform program in light of Ras Al Hikma project and the fact that this important project is in line with the decisions of the Egyptian Central Bank to liberate the Egyptian currency, to put an end to the parallel or the black market. All these recent measures enabled the international ranking institutions to commend the economic performance of Egypt according to all these measures. Dear viewers, this conference is held at a very important moment to emphasize the centrality of Egypt and the confidence given by the EU to Egypt at different levels. As we mentioned, this is the pillar of stability and security in the region, in addition to the developments it achieved through its economic reform program recently. There are a lot of fields for cooperation between Egypt and the EU that would be highlighted and discussed through this conference, through the different discussion sessions that would discuss different opportunities for economic cooperation in the field of water, energy, trade, economy, development, funding for investment and support to the private sector. That is considered to be the most important element in this conference. And as we always follow up the attention given by the President to the private sector, since he assumed office, he emphasized the important role of the private sector in increasing investments. This conference would review all different investment opportunities to attract local and international investors. As we mentioned, it's done with the contribution of all state institutions, the representatives of multilateral institutions in the EU, as well as the International Monetary Fund and development partners. This conference held with this wide participation is not just to hold rich discussions, but to turn these discussions into memos of understanding that would be signed over the 2 days. This conference would be held on the 29th and the 30th of June, today and tomorrow. This conference would have a lot of discussions and sessions. Today we will have an important session and it is the opening session during which we will find discussions with different Egyptian ministers in addition to senior officials from the EU to discuss how Egypt, through the economic reform measures, was able to be an enabling environment to attract foreign investments. And also another session on how Egypt can be an enabling environment for the multilaterals and multinational companies to work here in Egypt. And on the second day of this conference, there would be a session on cooperation between Egypt and the EU and the IMF to support the private sector, and also all forms of cooperation between Egypt and the EU countries, in particular in the field of industrialization. And this would highlight the logistics services provided here in Egypt, as well as discussions on opportunities for cooperation in the field of automotive industry. Also cooperation in the field of manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, in addition to modern agriculture, food security, water security, energy, trade, economy, investment. A lot of fields would be discussed during this important conference, held at a very important moment when the whole world is suffering from an economic crisis, and Egypt is hosting this conference with wide participation from EU countries and the big organizations, as well as the representatives of employers' organizations that would discuss contributing to investment in the different projects, infrastructure, as well as creating job opportunities. The EU is considered to be one of the important economic partners for Egypt over the previous years, and this momentum witnessed by the Egyptian-EU relations is translated through this important event, the Egyptian-European Joint Investment Conference. This conference is held also at a very important moment. It will discuss a lot of important files, like creating the working environment for entrepreneurs, as well as creating new job opportunities, in addition to environment preservation, investment in the field of renewable energy, green hydrogen, and also the big success Egypt was able to achieve in COP27. And this shows the ability of Egypt to host such events, and also the success through international effective decisions made during COP27 to protect environment and to achieve sustainable development. This is a very important file that would be discussed, cooperation between Egypt and the EU in the field of environment preservation, as well as the use of green hydrogen and preserving environment through all outcomes of COP27 that was held in Sharm el-Sheikh. Multiple diverse files are going to be tackled during the conference. The Egyptian EU Joint Investment Conference that would be held on 2 days, today and tomorrow, with auspices of President Sisi and the EU Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen, as well as the participation of a lot of EU delegates. And we can witness a large number of participants in this conference, as well as a large number of sessions. And there would be also bilateral sessions held between representatives of Egyptian companies and European companies, looking forward to more partnerships between both sides in different sectors of economy, trade and investment, as Egypt is considered to be the gateway to Africa and one of the important markets in Africa due to its great potentials. And Egypt also enjoys a lot of economic potentials as well as its great position in the region. And in addition to the measures that Egypt implemented recently. Dear viewers, we are now waiting for the entry of President Sisi to inaugurate officially this Egypt-EU investment conference held over these 2 days in Manara, the conference center.
الغاية في الأهمية الذي ينعقد بمشاركة حكومية واسعة من ممثلي الحكومة المصرية والاتحاد الأوروبي والمؤسسات متعددة.
The state institutions, the private sector from both sides, the Egyptian and the European. This conference is held over 2 days, 29th and the 30th of June, under the title Unleashing the Egyptian Capabilities in a Changing World, with the attendance of a group of senior government officials from Egypt and EU countries, as well as the representatives of development partners and multilateral institutions, in addition to representatives of Egyptian and European and international countries, as well as the representatives of Egyptian and European employers' organizations. On day one of this event, there would be a session to introduce the economic reform measures adopted by the Egyptian government to create an attracting investment environment, with the participation of a number of Egyptian ministers and EU commissioners, as well as multilaterals and the private sector. There would be another session that would cover the strategic measures to turn Egypt into a center to domesticate foreign companies in Egypt. In addition to another discussion for opportunities of cooperation between Egypt and IMF and the EU and its role in supporting the private sector. Rich sessions would be held on day one as well as day two of this conference to review the efforts of enabling the working environment in Egypt to be the center for industrialization. There would be a session on logistic services in Egypt and discuss the opportunities of automotive industry in Egypt, in addition to a session on the opportunities of enhancing pharmaceutical industry. The sessions today also would discuss investment opportunities in the field of renewable energy, as well as hydrogen and the value-added chains. The Egyptian EU Investment Conference is a new incentive to deliberately enhance the Egyptian-EU relations through more cooperation agreements and investment opportunities, as EU is considered to be one of the important trade partners to Egypt. This important conference reflects the confidence of the EU in the Egyptian economy, and it signifies the success of what was achieved during the previous years through the measures of economic reform. One of the most important elements in this conference is introducing investment opportunities in Egypt. Egypt has tens of economic and trade agreements with the EU covering a number of development and economic fields. And also the EU is one of the important trade partners to Egypt. The investment Egyptian-EU conference on its agenda would cover important files for cooperation between Egypt and the EU in a number of target fields in line with the needs of the development partners. At the level of GAFI, there are a number of targeted files for cooperation with the EU. In addition to the other activities, and also at the level of industry, there are 3 industrial fields that would witness further cooperation: pharmaceuticals, active materials, modern agriculture, modern irrigation systems, water management, in addition to food industry. The EU-Egypt Investment Conference re-emphasizes the pivotal role of Egypt as the pillar of stability and security in the region and a gateway to the African continent, and developing the relations between Egypt and EU to the level of comprehensive strategic partnership is so important, as Egypt is considered to be the only country in the region selected by the EU to develop relations with it to that level, and this emphasizes the importance given by the EU to Egypt. Within the framework of strategic Egyptian-European cooperation, the economic file enjoys great importance, and the most important considerations in this conference is the timing of the conference, as there are accelerated measures made by the State of Egypt to continue the path of economic reform, especially after agreeing on Ras Al Hikma project and the decisions of the Egyptian Central Bank to liberate the currency rate according to the market mechanisms and to end the parallel market. Reforms that were able to change the vision of the international ranking institutions, and they all now praise the Egyptian economy for all these measures and decisions. In addition to agreeing with the IMF, these measures increase the confidence in the Egyptian economy.
جلسات ثرية سوف يشهد
Rich sessions would be held over the 2 days of this conference, today and tomorrow. There would be a session to review the efforts of creating a good working environment in Egypt to be a hub for industrialization, as well as another session on logistics service in Egypt, discussing the opportunity of automotive industry in Egypt, and another session on enhancing pharmaceuticals. The sessions over day one of this conference would cover investment opportunities in the sector of renewable energy, green hydrogen value chains. And also, they would discuss in other sessions other important topics like funding for supporting investment in Egypt in light of this investment Egyptian-European joint conference. Enhancing the working environment for entrepreneurs is another important file that would be discussed during this conference, in addition to food security and water security. The conference would witness also the signature of memos of understanding for cooperation in different fields, like supporting investment, renewable energy, green hydrogen, macroeconomy, telecommunications and IT, as well as supporting exports and cooperation in the field of automotive industry, so that these rich sessions witnessed by the conference would be turned into memos of understanding and agreements for cooperation between Egypt and the EU. Right now, we are waiting for the entrance of President Sisi to inaugurate officially this important conference. This important event, the Egypt-EU Joint Investment Conference, held over 2 days, the 29th and the 30th of June in El Manara Conference Center.
نحن الآن مع حضراتكم على الهواء.
We are now on air waiting for the official opening of Egypt EU Investment Conference held today and tomorrow. This conference is a step to enhance long-term relations between Egypt and the EU, and in particular in the investment sectors due to the great potentials Egypt enjoys. Egypt is considered to be the main country that received EU investments, and Egypt is always an important partner to the EU, especially regarding the momentum enjoyed by the EU-Egyptian relations developed to the level of strategic partnership, and the history of partnership between Egypt and the EU was developed in 2004, and then in 2007 they set the priorities of the Egyptian EU partnership, and then raising this partnership to the level of comprehensive strategic partnership. 6 important fields would be the opportunities for cooperation between Egypt and the EU. Trade and economy, water, energy, transport, human development, and education. A conference that comes at a very important moment to emphasize confidence in Egypt's capabilities and economic potentials, as Egypt is always the oasis of stability and security in the region.
الآن في انتظار وصول.
We are waiting now for the arrival of President Sisi to the conference center to officially open the Egypt EU Investment Conference. A conference that would introduce different investment opportunities in the Egyptian economy. And this important conference would enhance and support cooperation between Egypt and the EU with the participation of a number of European economic entities and investment companies, and it would attract diverse important EU investments to Egypt, especially in priority areas, infrastructure, renewable energy, electricity, food security, health, education, sustainable transport, water and wastewater networks, in addition to small, medium enterprises and environment. The biggest part of this important conference would be for the private sector from Egypt and the EU, and this is the main purpose of holding this conference. The Egyptian European Investment Conference is held in Egypt as a message of confidence from the EU to the Egyptian economy for what was achieved through the economic reform program implemented by the state over the previous years, in addition to unprecedented infrastructure projects implemented during that period. This conference comes to emphasize the success of these measures undertaken by the State of Egypt, through which it was able to achieve stability in the Egyptian economy, especially liberating the currency rate and ending the price of the parallel market. Reforms that were able to be appraised by international ranking institutions. A lot of files are on the table to be discussed during this conference. The investment opportunities for investors would be presented to the Egyptian and European investors, as well as investment opportunities according to the different sectoral criteria in line with the strategy of the government of Egypt.
من أهم أهداف
One of the objectives of this conference is enhancing economic cooperation with the EU. The means of economic cooperation between Egypt and EU parties would be discussed, and also developing the infrastructure and the major products, as they would discuss the opportunities of developing infrastructure and implementing major projects in Egypt in the field of transport, energy and technology, enhancing innovation and economic entrepreneurship would be discussed also during this important conference. The conference also would focus on the importance of entrepreneurship and innovation in enhancing economy and creating job opportunities. Sustainable development and environment would also be discussed in light of the environmental international challenges. Another important file that would be discussed during this conference is cultural and educational cooperation. Opportunities for cooperation in cultural and educational fields between Egypt and the EU would be discussed. And also the conference would discuss important files for cooperation with the EU in a number of targeted sectors in line with the other development partners, through a number of grants that would be provided by the EU from 2014 till 2027 in the priority areas for both fields at the bilateral and multilateral levels, through regional and bilateral cooperation, as well as cooperation with the EU and its financial institutions in the field of green hydrogen. At the level of GAFI, there are a number of targeted fields for cooperation with the EU in addition to other branches. A lot of mechanisms to present the investment opportunities in different sectors that would be discussed through the sessions of this conference over these 2 days, today and tomorrow. And on ground, it would be turned into memos of understanding between Egypt and EU countries. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, and President Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the EU Commission.
فخامة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي رئيس جمهورية مصر العربية، السيدة أورسولا فوندر لاين رئيسة المفوضية الأوروبية،
the President of EU Commission, distinguished ministers, members of the business community, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you all to Egypt EU Investment Conference that represents a turning point in the strategic partnership between Egypt and the EU, and it reflects their joint commitment to enhance economic and investment cooperation. Over the coming 2 days, we will review a number of investment promising opportunities in different fields, in addition to signing a number of memos of understanding and agreements, as well as holding constructive discussions. These sessions over the 2 days would cover main topics: industry, energy, food, technology, entrepreneurship, investment and funding opportunities, to have a comprehensive vision about the prominent elements of success and investment opportunities. This conference aims at developing partnership between the private sector and the EU in Egypt, as well as giving due interest to attracting investments that contribute to giving momentum to economic development, while focusing on developing new cooperation relations, as well as encouraging innovation through knowledge sharing, in light of the presence of a large number of Egyptian and European companies. Distinguished guests, let us watch this documentary that focuses on promising investment opportunities in Egypt and its competitive edge.
Strategically located at the crossroads of Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, Egypt offers unparalleled access to key markets. With its abundant young and skilled workforce and dynamic population, Egypt is the hub for manufacturing, transport and logistics, green hydrogen, oil and gas, and internet. Modern ports, superhighways, and a robust rail network solidify Egypt's role as a global trade hub. Projects like the Suez Canal Economic Zone and the development of the New Al Amin. The digital economy is expanding with sectors such as fintech, health tech, entrepreneurship and data centers experiencing rapid growth. Raised 217 million in 2022, an 18% increase from 2021. With Tiba-1, Egypt's first communication satellite, the nation's digital connectivity supports sectors like education, health and agriculture, enhancing overall efficiency. Egypt's impressive connectivity infrastructure is highlighted by the extensive telecom digital cables network. This infrastructure enhances digital connectivity, linking Egypt with Europe and beyond. Addressing urbanization challenges, Egypt is developing projects like the Cairo Metro expansion and the development of 22 new smart cities. Enhanced connectivity and sustainability is key to Egypt's future. Water scarcity is tackled through advanced water management systems. The Al Mahsama water reclamation plant, for instance, treats and reuses agricultural drainage water, and supporting sustainable agriculture in addition to food production that advances with new agro-industrial zones. In response to global environmental challenges, the country is committed to building a sustainable and resilient green economy. Renewable energy projects like the 1.8 gigawatt Bimban solar park and the 580 megawatt Jebel el-Zayt wind farm reduce reliance on fossil fuels and attract foreign investments through PPPs. Renewable energy has been a major focus for foreign investment, with total investments exceeding 40 billion euros. This ecosystem for investment is expected to grow even further in the coming years. Strategic initiatives to foster a business-friendly environment have transformed the government's role from being an operator to a highly needed regulator, according to the new state vision, encouraging public-private partnerships. Education is a cornerstone of Egypt's growth strategy. Modern educational facilities and digital classrooms are preparing a new generation of skilled professionals ready to contribute with the global economy. Join us in shaping a prosperous tomorrow. Welcome to Egypt, the land of business opportunities.
Your Excellency, Ministers, gentlemen, the representatives of international European institutions and nations, gentlemen, the heads of the board of directors of the European and Egyptian companies, distinguished guests. I would like to welcome you today as guests to Egypt, commending your participation in Egypt-EU Investment Conference 2024. And we wish that this conference would be a new fruitful step in the cooperation between Egypt and the EU. Ladies and gentlemen, the relations between Egypt and EU witnesses positive developments in different fields of cooperation, and this development was crowned by signing the political declaration to develop the relations between both sides to the level of strategic comprehensive partnership last March. And here we are convening for the second time in a short period to witness the EU-Egypt Investment Conference 2024. That represents the first implementation steps to develop these relations, and it also reflects the commitment of Egypt and the EU to overcoming the level of vows and pledges to the level of participation and implementation. Ladies and gentlemen, the strategic partnership between Egypt and the EU covers 7 fields, on top of which is investment, as both sides are committed to enhancing cooperation in different economic priority sectors, including trade, energy, infrastructure, sustainable transport, agriculture, food security, digital transformation, water security, water and wastewater networks, small and medium enterprises, in addition to other vital sectors that would mobilize EU investments of about 5 billion euros. Besides investment guarantees for 1.8 billion euros to the private sector to increase foreign direct investments and enable the European business community to benefit from the investment opportunities in Egypt. And it enhances also the position of the EU as the commercial and economic partnership to the Egyptian economy. I would like to seize this opportunity to extend thanks to the EU Commissioner for the efforts she exerts to support developing the relations with Egypt due to her conviction of the pivotal role of Egypt as a strategic partner to the EU in the region. And it reflects the strength of our bilateral relations, especially at critical moments like the moments witnessed by the international economy right now. Ladies and gentlemen, holding the Egypt-EU Investment Conference comes in light of international and regional successive crises that overshadowed negatively the region and burdened all countries all over the world with different levels. And this necessitates support and coordination continuously between Egypt and its partners in Europe to sustainably tackle these challenges, in particular after Egypt proved that it's a partner that other countries can depend on in dealing with the joint challenges to achieve security and stability in our region and the neighborhood. Egypt is steadily moving towards the change and reform for a more sustainable economy, and in its attempt to do so, the state implemented a number of reforms for empowering the private sector and increasing the competitive edge of the Egyptian economy, as well as supporting green digitalization and green transition, as well as mobilizing foreign direct investments. Our conference today would give the opportunity to the state and economic European entities to review the investment opportunities available in Egypt, in particular in the field supporting economic growth, employment, like ITC, as well as manufacturing the renewable energy, in addition to the circular economy, in addition to promoting Egypt as a regional hub for the supply chains for European countries, as well as a hub for renewable and green energy in light to its geographical proximity and geographical location, in addition to highlighting the areas attracting investment in Egypt, like Suez Canal Economic Zone. Holding this conference today represents a message of confidence and support from the EU to the Egyptian economy and the economic reform measures implemented throughout the past 10 years. And the state is keen on continuing its implementation in the coming period, and this reflects the success of these steps and emphasizes the ability of Egypt to overcome the economic challenges and move forward towards implementing the Sustainable Development Plan. Ladies and gentlemen, the guests of Egypt, I would like to welcome you once more, and I look forward to a successful, fruitful conference that would achieve concrete, implementable results that would enhance economic cooperation between Egypt and the EU and would contribute to increasing the levels of the flow of European investments to the Egyptian market to achieve security, stability, and welfare for our nations and our countries. Thank you, and peace be upon you.
شكرا فخامة الرئيس
على Excellency President for this speech, and now we would like to welcome the President of EU Commission, Ms. Ursula von der Leyen, to deliver her opening speech.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen.
Your Excellency the President, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, it was only 100 days since we opened a new era of friendship between Egypt and the EU, and today we are already reaping the fruit of this development. Your Excellency President Sisi, thank you very much for the hospitality. Last March, you welcomed me and 5 European leaders here in Egypt, in this historical city, and we signed a new strategic partnership agreement between Egypt and the EU. And this, of course, builds upon the ties between both of us and opens new fields for cooperation between Egypt and the EU. Europe is already Egypt's large trade partner, and it has about 40% of the foreign direct investments in Egypt. And with our new agreement, we decided to reach a new level of cooperation and strategic partnership. Egypt is a gateway to Europe and to Africa, with its location between Egypt, Europe, Africa, the Middle East. Accordingly, the welfare of Egypt and its stability is so important for the whole region. Today we come here accompanied by European companies and financial institutions and investors, and in fact we have more than 1,000 companies represented here in this room, waiting to hear from us the investment opportunities, and also we are looking forward to listening to you and know what can be done to facilitate investments. As the European Union, we are committed to the pledges and the commitment we made 3 months ago, and provide more financial assistance, and secondly, more investments in the strategic sectors, and thirdly, more capabilities and skills for the Egyptian workers. For the first point, in March, we announced a major package of 7.4 billion euros, and today we are going to sign the first 1 billion euros for the financial assistance to macroeconomy that would support the reform agenda in Egypt, and these reforms would enhance the investment environment and would attract more investors and would create better investment opportunities in Egypt. Secondly, with the strategic partnership, we pledged to increase our investments in Egypt, and now we can mobilize more European investments of about 1.8 billion euros, and they would be directed to the strategic sectors we identified last March. And let me give you an example. Egypt has the ambitious goal of becoming a clean energy hub, and this is in the interest of Europe. Being a clean energy hub would put Egypt in the middle of the Mediterranean market with new corridors for energy, but also it would link the value chains between Europe and the Gulf. And today we depend mainly on renewable energy and the batteries produced in faraway areas. What if we can produce them in our region? That's why we are investing now in this region. To achieve this, we have also to strengthen the capabilities and the skills needed by the Egyptians to flourish for the economy of tomorrow. And this is my third and last example. Today we are going to sign an agreement for a new project of 25 million euros to provide digital training for the Egyptian youth so that the companies would find the qualified, skilled employees, and the Egyptians would find decent job opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, we are backing our new partnership with public partnerships and investments, and the real difference would be made by the idea of joining the private sector. In doing so, we developed a framework of confidence about the future direction of our relation, and this is exactly the message the private sector needs to hear from us. Our commitment to support Egypt has already supported the private sector, and the response we have received from the private sector was great. And here European companies are signing 20 new deals and MOUs with Egyptian partners, and we are going to work with about 40 billion euros. We have companies in sectors like hydrogen, water management, construction, chemicals, shipping, aviation, and automotives. And you cover
that we have set out in our new partnership, and this is crucial. So thank you for the trust you are placing in this partnership, because we need each and every one of you to make this partnership successful. Our public investment
تمام.
not only you have the know-how how to set up new industries here in Egypt or how to train local workers. So it is you in the business sector who are pioneering the technologies of the future, and we need you. Ladies and gentlemen, in just 100 days we have already brought new energy into our partnership. And this is just the beginning. Today, Egypt and Europe are closer than ever before. So this is a true win-win partnership for Egypt and for Europe alike, for the people and for business, and of course for the common good. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to have you here.
السادة الحضور، ستبدأ الآن الجلسة الحوارية للمؤتمر تحت اسم الإصلاح الاقتصادي ومناخ الاستثمار.
The economic reform.
عن أبرز الإصلاحات الداعمة للاقتصاد المصري، بالإضافة إلى طبعا سبل التعاون المصري الأوروبي في زيادة الاستثمارات وتعظيم دور
to increase the investments and maximize the role of development partners and private sector. Let me invite Mr. Osama Kamal to moderate this session. Your Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, Your Excellency, the President of EU Commission, Ms. Ursula von der Leyen, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to be here with you today in the first session in this important conference under the title Showcasing Egypt Reform Agenda and Investment Climate. In fact, the conference is not the beginning of the Egyptian-EU partnership, but it's a new step in continuous long-term cooperation between Egypt and the EU, even before establishing the EU itself. But the presence of the EU enhanced this joint cooperation, and this cooperation extends to reach international multilateral organizations as well as partners of development. This conference is held in light of great regional and international unprecedented challenge since World War II. Egypt is seeking to confront these challenges through multiple measures like economic structural reform. In order not to be lengthy, let me invite the panelists, Mr. Karim Awad, the Executive Director of EFG Holding. And let me invite Ms. Anna Bierdi, the General Director of Operations in the World Bank. And let me invite Minister Rania Al-Mashat, the Minister of International Cooperation from the Arab Republic of Egypt. I would like also to invite Mr. Oliver Varhelyi, the EU Commissioner for Neighborhood. And let me invite Minister Hala Said, the Minister of Planning and Economic Development in the Arab Republic of Egypt. And let me invite Mr. Vagner Dombrovskis, the Deputy CEO of the EU Commission. Let's start this session, and I would like to welcome the panelists. I will start with Minister Hala Said. I would like to start with you so that you would introduce to us the most important elements of the National Program for Structural Reform. What are the mechanisms to develop? And it's so important also for us to know the methodology of following up the programs. In the name of Allah, Your Excellency President Fattah al-Sisi, the President of the Republic, Ms. Ursula von der Leyen, the guests, distinguished guests. Egypt has been through a number of reform programs, and because reform is a continuous process, over the previous 10 years since we started political and security stability, since 2014 we started an integrated structural reform program. I would like to emphasize that structural reform programs in Egypt over the previous 10 years were done in a participatory manner. It means that the program and the plan are developed by the government, the private sector and the civil society, and not by the government alone. The structural reform program in Egypt is based on four main elements. The first is focusing mainly on the production sector in Egypt. It is industry, agriculture, information technology and communication. And why are we focusing on the production sector? Because the world over the previous years has been through a number of challenges and a large number of external shocks. External shocks started with pandemic COVID-19, geopolitical crises, as well as climate change and its impact on economies. All this made us focus on production sectors, ITC, agriculture and industry, in addition to other two sectors that we have competitive edge, logistics and tourism. The second element is increasing the participation of the private sector in development. It is so important to emphasize that we consider the private sector as a main partner to development, and that's why the state developed a number of policies and measures as well as legislation and a group of investments in infrastructure so that it would motivate the private sector to invest. We took a large number of measures like liberating the currency rate, financial and fiscal reforms. We launched the state ownership document that shows how we offer a number of state-owned companies for the private sector. We launched also a number of investment incentives to domesticate industries and investments in specific areas or sectors, in particular the green sustainable sectors. The state in this type of industries and investments incur 30% of the investment costs, in addition to exemptions for small and medium enterprises from taxes for 5 years, because these are feeding industries to other industries. The last point, please. Yes, the big investment in infrastructure comes next, so that the infrastructure would motivate the private sector. We invested in road network, port network on the Red Sea and the Mediterranean. Egypt would be a hub. The third element is the labor market efficiency. Egypt is a big country that has a big market, and this motivates investment. With the overpopulation, it was a demographic edge that I have 70% of the population under the age of 40. So we needed to invest in technical and vocational education and technological education, and invest for the jobs of the future. The fourth and third element, it is social protection. Why social protection? because this secures stability, peace in Egypt. The president launched the biggest development project in the world, and it is Decent Life Initiative that provides wastewater, drinking water, services, as well as schools and houses in people in rural areas. Thank you. Osama, give her some time, please.
أنا خدت الإذن. That's our lady يعني. لا لا لا. أنا كده خدت الإذن. طيب طيب. شكرا يا فندم.
I took the permission. Why do we invest in providing these services to people in rural areas? Because we are looking at the right to development as one of the human rights. The last thing is the national project for developing the Egyptian family as a part of social protection, and here we're talking about regulating overpopulation and also investing in the demographic characteristics as well as economic empowerment of women is an element that is given priority from the political leadership and from all state institutions. We are talking about political, economic, social empowerment for women. The state is not considering women as half the community, but as a main element to improve the status of the family and to develop the community. Thank you very much, and sorry for being lengthy.
Your Excellency, Mr. Dombrovsky, بالتأكيد سبب وجودنا النهارده هو
Of course, Mr. Dombrovsky, we are here because there is a vision for the EU to Egypt regarding the current reforms or the previous ones. Would you tell us what are the reforms that you agreed on with the Egyptian side for partnership, and especially at the level of macroeconomics?
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Well, first of all, it's a
Your
pleasure
Excellencies,
to be here
ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here. In the EU,
and strategic partnership is still very young, but we're already having first tangible deliverables, including also on our investment package, which among others includes 5 billion euros in macro-financial assistance, and today we are going to sign the first memorandum of understanding for a short-term program of 1 billion euros. And indeed, when we were discussing this program, we were also discussing the cooperation on reform areas which we would need to engage. And I would say already many things have been mentioned. So first is focus on macroeconomic stability and resilience. Then competitiveness and business environment, and the green transition. So I would highlight those three elements. Let me focus for a while on the questions on competitiveness and business environment. Egypt indeed has a dynamic economy. It has a young workforce, growing population, which means also many people entering the labor market each year. So correspondingly, the labor market needs to be able to absorb all those people. And this requires more private sector-led economic growth. So helping private sector to develop faster, improving the business environment, simplifying different licensing requirements, providing more clarity and transparency for investors on different procedures and requirements to do investment, to do trade. All this is reflected in reform areas which we have been discussing. Another important area is green transition. We see that Egypt has a great potential in this area. We already saw showcasing the solar, wind power projects. We see potential, for example, in area of exporting hydrogen to the EU. So everything we can do in area in a green transition in energy is certainly another important direction, and also that requires reforms, for example, on energy sector, third-party access to the infrastructure, other elements. So we are working on all of these. And all in all, we see that there is a potential to further develop our economic and trade cooperation. EU is already the largest trading partner with 27% share of trade with Egypt. We are EU's largest investor, but this new strategic and comprehensive partnership, I think, provides us with new horizons, and our trade and economic relationship can continue to drive to increase dynamically. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. معالي الوزيرة دكتورة رانيا تيم يوروب يعني فريق أوروبا
Team Europe has a special relation. There is special relations between Team Europe and Egypt, and it had great and important results, not only with them, but with other development partners and other international organizations. This supported investments, especially investments for the private sector. Would you please give us an idea about these relations? Thank you very much. Good morning. It is so important, as the President and the EU Commissioner mentioned in their opening speeches, that the strategic relationship between Egypt and the EU witnessed remarkable development over the previous 5 years. And before talking about the strategic relation that was stepped up in March 2024, we need to say that investment and trade, and today we are in a conference inviting for increasing investments and trade between both partners. So the base here is funding mechanisms. If we're talking about the EU, we're talking about bilateral relations with member states as well as international and European investment projects. We are talking about the European Investment Bank and the European Bank for Construction and Development. This close relation wouldn't have been implemented on the ground through clear projects with joint interest and returns, not only for Egypt but also for Europe and European partners, and the partnership between the Egyptian and the European private sector wouldn't have been implemented without four main things. One, the priority sectors are sectors built on national vision, as well as discussion between both sides, and we have seen this in renewable energy, logistics and ports, projects for food security. Second, the available funding mechanisms from the member states and the funding institutions, like the innovative tools, they are all available for the private sector. And during the past 5 years, more than $6 billion were directed to the private sector, and the funding that comes within the framework of EU-Egyptian partnership is soft loans. And let's put a line under this, because this is less than the cost of the market. The third important point, and we have here partners like the World Bank and the International Financing Corporation, the IFC, we are enhancing the funding provided through integration with other financing institutions. The projects implemented by the private sector in Egypt are attractive to funding, not only from the European partner, but also from other financing institutions, because Egypt is considered to be a platform for international cooperation through these important institutions. So these are the three important points. The other thing is transitioning to green economy. Egypt, with the EU, started the national platform NWAFI program, and this is the link between the energy, water, and food nexus. And we heard in the opening speech meeting the pledges, and here came the word NWAFI. How can we achieve all the objectives regarding climate through attracting investments to the private sector through soft loans? And stepping up the relations has a part for green transition. Before wrapping up my speech, I would like to say that stepping up the relations in the coming phase is built on also financial cooperation, and this financial cooperation is divided into three main points. One, macroeconomic stability and budget support, and Mr. Valdez talked about it. This matrix targets three main things: stability of macroeconomy in Egypt to attract investments, two, increasing competitiveness, and here there are clear policies and measures that would be discussed in other sessions, and three is green transition, and also there are investment guarantees, and this attracts more investments through other financing institutions. And tomorrow we'll have a closed session with international institutions on how the $1.8 billion available from the EU can be $5 billion through other institutions. I have more to say, of course, but I think that you need me to wrap up. Yes. I will try to make my questions brief. Mr. Oliver Verhelyi, what are the priorities of the EU in the partnership relation?
Maybe I start a bit further away. First of all, when we picked up work 5 years ago, the instruction from my president was to try and create something new that is more relevant to the level of relationship we would like to have with Egypt. And the assignment was to be more relevant. And when we sat down with my good friend, Minister Shukri, and also then I got to see Mr. President Sisi, the message I received was that let's work on a more resilient and a more diversified economy and a more modern economy, because after all, the resilience of a country is very much dependent on a strong modern economy. And this is where we started working. Yes, we see now the next stage of our partnership. I do hope that this will bring the golden age of EU-Egypt relationship. This is very much something that you see emerging now. But we have started working on an economic and investment plan first. An economic and investment plan which I would say was the basis of this new way of thinking. How to bring growth and jobs. How to bring growth and jobs for the people of Egypt. So far, we have mobilized in the first 3 years, since 2021, already 5.8 billion euros of investments into the economy of Egypt. In critical sectors, water management, energy, transport infrastructure. So all the key levers through which growth and jobs can be created. What you see unfolding now is very much the private component, because of course this new way of thinking brought also the need that it's not simply financing that we would like to be part of. We would like to be part of building a real economy. So today what you see of the, we hope, 40 billion euros of investment agreements, if you look at the figures, the national figures of Egypt, that is 4 years of foreign direct investment. And this is triggered because of this partnership. There is nothing else that promotes better this new partnership.
Thank you very much. Ms. Anna.
The launching for this. Thank you.
Since you've taken the headpiece off, let me say that in English. Looking at the multinational entities,
أطرح السؤال باللغة الإنجليزية.
About the private sector, what is the role of the World Bank and the multinational entities in supporting the private sector?
Well, thank you very much. And let me, first of all, just say how pleased and happy I am to be representing the World Bank Group here today, and really commend Egypt and the European Union for this investment conference, which takes place at such an important time. So the role of the World Bank Group, which represents both institutions that invest in the public sector as well as the private sector, is really to accompany our client, in this case Egypt, and we have a really long-standing relationship with Egypt. And we do this primarily through 3 different mechanisms. The first one is, of course, that we partner around diagnostics. And here the important role is for us to, of course, bring ideas and knowledge, but also very much harness Egypt's ideas and knowledge with the rest of the world. And 2 important recent diagnostic pieces that I would like to bring attention to here is a private sector diagnostic, which has really helped to identify the opportunities, but also the constraints that need to be addressed to really increase the role of the private sector. And the other one is a climate and development report, which looks at the ability to really leverage both climate action as well as economic growth. And this is so important for the green transition. And the second is our financing. And here, the important part is to pay attention to the World Bank public sector financing, as well as IFC, our sister organization, which invests through debt and equity, as well as MIGA, the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, which provides guarantees. And all 3 parts make a big difference, and we can come together and leverage all 3 parts. And the third part I would like to mention are innovations. And these are really important to make sure that we stay relevant and that we stay attuned with what countries need. And here I will just mention 2. On July 1, we will open the doors to our new unified guarantee platform, where we will increase tremendously and ambitiously the offering of guarantees, something that we hear over and over again is needed for the private sector to be able to de-risk and approach countries with much more ambition. And the other is something that came out of the fact that we've been living through one crisis after the other, which is what we call a crisis response toolkit, where all of our clients can utilize undispersed amounts as immediate liquidity at a time of crisis. And we believe that's also very important because the world continues to go through challenges and crises, and countries need to have the mechanism not to have to make really unsustainable choices at a time of crisis, but to have the liquidity they need. And we believe for the private sector this is also important because the private sector looks for that stability when it comes to policies, regulatory arrangements, as well as economic fundamentals. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
For economic and political measures. Thank you.
It's clear the private sector is just
من الواضح أن
It is clear that the
الخاص
private
هو
sector
صاحب أكبر قدر من التصفيق هنا.
is encouraging what you just said, Mr. Karim. Since we are talking about the private sector and we are talking about local and foreign investors, and you talk to them, what are the impressions of new investors or investors in general on the structural economic reforms taking place in Egypt? Good morning. Thank you for the kind invitation. It's an honor for me to attend this conference today. We are one of the biggest investment banks in the region, so we work continuously with foreign investors who look at investment opportunities in Egypt, and their impression about the recent reforms were very positive. We have seen this through having indirect investments in Egyptian treasury bonds, and also the price of the euro bonds that increased greatly recently. As for foreign direct investment, besides a lot of the projects that were mentioned and Ras Al Hikma project, there are a lot of other projects that are being studied to the back. In my personal opinion, I think that one of the means to accelerate the foreign direct investment is increasing the activity of the Egyptian private sector, because when the Egyptian investor starts to invest, this reassures the foreign investor to come to this country, because he's assured about the growth horizon in the country. How can we measure the impression of the Egyptian private sector about the recent economic reforms? Of course, there are a lot of indicators. The indicator that we are following is the BMI index, and it reached 29.6 points in May, and this is a bit less than the 50 points that the investor considered that the private sector in any country is expanding, because this is the highest reading of this indicator over the previous 3 years, and this can be a promising beginning, and we wish it would go on. So our expectation is that the inflation rate would decrease, and also the interest rate would decrease, and when the state continues its economic reform program, we will start to see this indicator above 50 points monthly, and this would increase foreign direct investments. Thank you. Minister Hala Said, here we are talking about the same structure, the private sector, and the reforms, and as the President mentioned, part of this should be done by the private sector. So what is the impact of the reform on the private sector, especially in light of Egypt's sovereign fund? What is this role? Thank you, Mr. Osama. All these reforms, and as Mr. Karim said, reflected positively on the role of the private sector. I would like to emphasize one point. While evaluating any reform program, we need to evaluate it in light of regional and international challenges. I cannot assess any local experience apart from regional and international developments. But despite all these challenges, let me tell you that Egypt over the past year and a half offered 14 companies out of the 32 companies that would be offered. They were offered to a strategic investor or in the Egyptian exchange market. We attracted 65 investment opportunities in 14 sectors over the previous 3 years, and we implemented the golden license for 29 projects. And this is one license to facilitate all the procedures in dealing with the state institutions. This reflected on the share of the private sector. The share of the private sector from the total investments, and this was not that much over the previous years. Why? Because it was 28%, because in the first period from 2016 the state intervened with pumping a lot of investments to improve the level of infrastructure. And the second point is that we pumped investments in 2019 and 2020, like all countries in the world, to support economies. So the private investment did not reduce, but it was 28%, and this year it would be 40% by the end of this fiscal year, and we are targeting 50% in the next year and 65% by the end of 2027. But what's more important than the share of private sector in investment is its share in the production. The other important thing is its share in employability. The private sector is the main employer. 80% of the manpower in Egypt work in the private sector, according to the economic census from CAPMAS. Egypt's sovereign fund is like all other sovereign funds worldwide. It is one of the investment arms for the state, and it is a mechanism for partnership between the government and the private sector, and it is also a mechanism to diversify the funding sources. What did we do recently? We worked with a number of ministries and state institutions and Suez Canal Economic Zone to turn Egypt into a regional hub for new and renewable energy, because Egypt has a competitive edge in this field, and we cooperated as state institutions and private sector and ministries to turn Egypt into a regional hub for new and renewable energy and to domesticate industries related to this type of projects, like electrolyzers and membranes, because such projects want to sustain without domesticating and localizing the industries. We are trying to do the same with electric vehicles and trains, because Egypt, after investing in the infrastructure and public transportation, we wanted to provide decent means of transportation, so we wanted to invest in localizing electric vehicles and also feeding industries. We are supporting the emerging companies, and we are using the unused assets. The land of the cosmetic village is now a multi-purpose project in partnership with the private sector, in addition to turning Tahrir complex into a hotel, as well as developing other facilities and buildings by the private sector. We implemented 17 projects over the previous 4 years with 52 billion Egyptian pounds for local investments and 1.5 billion euros foreign investments. Mr. Dombrovskis, I want to talk about resilience mentioned by Mr. Oliver, the resilience of the Egyptian economy in the past period, and the coming elements in the future that would make the resilience of the Egyptian economy higher. And I'm using the term resilience in English because it means a lot. It's our ability. What are the main elements that can help the Egyptian economy?
Well, indeed, strengthening the resilience is one of the key goals on reform agenda which Egypt has now embarked on. And resilience, well, first it starts with financial and macroeconomic stability, because financial and macroeconomic stability is a basis on which you can build. There is no economic growth without financial stability, and we know that Egypt has faced very challenging macroeconomic conditions, and work is ongoing still on both macroeconomic and fiscal side, but that's indispensable, because that provides the basis for all the next steps, and also our macrofinancial assistance program is part of this work to provide this basis. Second, as we already were discussing, it's more diversification, because another key for resilience is to have a broad and diversified economy, and that requires also broader public sector participation in economy. That's why we're talking about business environment, competitiveness. Also important point is leveling the playing field and ensuring competitive neutrality of state-owned enterprises. We know Egypt has a quite large state or state-related sector, so there also needs to be a level playing field so that actually private sector can develop more dynamically. Third is to follow with tendencies of our time, embarking in green and digital transformations of the economy, which requires lots of investment, which also requires skills. So that's why, along with all different economic, trade, investment cooperation, we are also developing cooperation in the area of skills. And finally, we know that this is a very ambitious reform agenda which Egypt is currently undertaking, and it's putting strain on public administration. But part of this work on digitization, automation, reduction of the red tape can also actually free up resources on public administration and help to advance policy areas which are very necessary. So as you see, there is no one single bullet for achieving the resilience of economy. That's quite a complex reform program which needs to be implemented, but we see that the work in Egypt is well underway on this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. دكتورة رانيا يعني
Dr. Rania, again, the main recurrent terms here are the private sector and investment. And we heard from the panelists the volume of investments. I know that we all want to increase these investments in the future, especially those for the private sector through cooperation with the EU partner. I would like to tell you what are the important funding mechanisms for the private sector, be it Egyptian or foreigner. There are credit lines through the Egyptian banks provided by EU partners. If you look at the European Investment Bank, they have credit lines of about $3 billion. The EU partner also increases the capitals of the companies, especially the shares funds, more than $300 million. These are the ones that go to entrepreneurs and also small and medium enterprises. Here we're talking about the private sector. We are not talking about the big private sector only, but we talk also about small and medium enterprises and micro enterprises and entrepreneurs. So there is a credit lines through Egyptian banks and contributing to the capitals of the companies, and this is taking place. And with stepping up the relations, any investor needs two things: political stability between both partners, and this is the case, and he wants the funding opportunities to be available at the least cost, and the European partner would be able to complement with other partners, as we heard from the World Bank, and he wants that the precedents would be serious. If we look at some examples, and there are other 2 points with the mechanisms of funding, the EU mentions innovative finance, blended finance. What is this? It means the EU grants go as funding through the banks to reduce the cost. So this is all available, and we're not talking about only the future, but practically speaking, in a lot of projects they benefited from it. Like, for example, recently containers in Damietta port with France, Germany, in European Investment Bank, IFC, and a partnership between German and French companies are implementing it. If we look at new and renewable energy, we have Comombo, Suez Gulf, and other projects where there are more than one partner. If we look at Egypt Green, the project in Suez Canal Economic Zone and its partnership between the Sovereign Fund and Scatic Company and Orascom, these are multiple funds with important grants. The other important thing is the technical assistance. Any project needs a feasibility study, and through our partnership with the EU, the feasibility study and the technical assistance is provided. And as the EU Commissioner said in the morning, there is an important partnership through increasing the skills and qualifications needed for the labor market in the future. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Mr. Oliver Van Heri.
Mr. Oliver Van Heri, let's look at the future.
Speak in English or in English? Okay. Looking forwards, and I'm looking at the future. What do you think is
Looking in the future, what's still missing?
لم يزل ناقصا. كيف يمكن
What are the fields?
ما هي القطاعات؟
How
I think,
can
today you will see already all the main sectors where we have a common challenge. Many of you mentioned already energy. Energy is a common challenge both for Egypt and for Europe. Egypt wants an economy which is stronger, and it has a population that is growing really fast, which means Egypt needs more energy. While if you look at the traditional fossil fuel related energy sources, Egypt does not have the potential to grow, but it has a vast potential when it comes to renewable energy, be it solar, be it wind power. Egypt could become not only supplying its own electricity, but Egypt could become a serious supplier of Europe, a reliable supplier of Europe with green electricity. The first project you have seen, the Gregi, the undersea cable that is going to Greece. But we do hope that this is only the first bird. We do hope that we will have more of this coming from Egypt to Europe. Then you will see contracts to be signed today on hydrogen, the next source of energy instead of fossil fuel. Again, Egypt has a huge potential because it seems that Egypt has found a formula with which it can drive down the costs of creating green hydrogen. And for that reason, major investment agreements will be signed today. So we do hope that Egypt will become one of our main hydrogen supplier. And then there is an agreement that we have already made between Egypt and Israel and the European Union, and that has got to do with LNG, because still, while we are doing the green transition, we will still continue to need gas in Europe. And this is why I think Egypt, again, a reliable partner, is bringing us the energy we need. And this is only energy, and then we can talk about digital. You will see contracts being signed in the digital area. We have the Medusa, broadband internet connectivity between the two continents, which will trigger immediate investments, we hope, and I hope to see these companies coming forward today, into the digital economy of Egypt. And the third area I would want to highlight, something I think very precious here in Egypt, and it has to do with water and it has to do with food, because the growing population will have to be fed. And this we have seen with the Russian aggression against Ukraine, how vulnerable the food supply chain can be. And this is why investing in new technologies in the food production sector, agriculture and the food industry, together with the water sector, is a critical area. So we will push for these. And maybe one last remark, don't forget, many investors are now looking for alternatives, coming closer to our markets with their production capacities. Egypt is not only at the crossroads of the different regions of the world, but Egypt has always been at the crossroads of the economies and the trade routes. So perfectly positioned to welcome nearshoring investments, as we call it. Thank you.
Thank you. Very well said. Thank you. Ms. Anna Verde, okay, let me ask in English again. What more is needed in terms of reform so that we can be more attractive for foreign investors?
Thank you so much. Well, as we've heard this morning from Their Excellencies and also from the panel, Egypt has all the essential ingredients for a really attractive investment climate. And I would just emphasize, or perhaps re-emphasize, the four important reforms that are underway and that are so important. The first one is Egypt has embarked on a really significant adjustment of its economy, which is really important because a stable economy which provides for some visibility and regulatory stability is really important for the private sector. So to stay the course under this medium-term framework that Egypt has put in place is really important. The second is the very important policy on state ownership that Egypt has launched is also important, because it's good to be able to spell out the difference role between the public sector and the private sector, and also for the public sector to play this enabling role for the private sector to be able to take a greater share. We heard about the importance of competition policy, which is also very good. There's been some very important legislation around insolvency, small claims, but also streamlining judicial processes for the commercial sector. And last, we've talked about it as well, but here I really want to commend the government of Egypt for all the work on advancing human development factors. So here the investments in education and health, as well as the region's, I would say, most successful social safety net program in the form of Takaful and Karama, and now with the innovation that if you become eligible for this program, you also become eligible for the new health insurance scheme, which is so important. So I would say these four parts are really, really important for attracting the private sector, but again, the essential ingredients are there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. أستاذ كريم يعني احنا شايفين
Mr. Karim, we can see these reforms, and we are here in this conference today to discuss them further. If I would start talking after all I heard, then idea now would be different from the idea I had yesterday. By the end of the conference and looking at these reforms, can we say something different to the local and foreign investor? Yes, of course. In my opinion, things are totally different, and Egypt was and is still a market that attracts local and foreign investments due to a lot of factors like the number of population, the qualified and trained and skilled employees in Egypt. One of the important factors that was not mentioned is a big banking sector. If we would look today at the investment opportunities in Egypt, we can divide them into opportunities in old economy and new economy. For the new economy, I am biased to technology sector in Egypt, and I believe that there are a lot of opportunities in infrastructure like data centers or startups and fintech companies, and these were all projects that were able to attract millions of dollars for investments due to the calibers in them and the volume of the Egyptian market. Concerning the conventional economy, I believe that tourism is one of the important sectors in Egypt because we have unique components that can increase the number of tourists we receive. And the biggest direct investments Egypt received recently was in the field of tourism, be it in Ras Al Hikma or the hotels historical deal that was in cooperation between the Egyptian government, sovereign fund, foreign investors, and the Egyptian private sector. And as mentioned, I believe that any sector that serves this large population of Egypt, food, health, services, infrastructure, would always attract investments. And I'm confident that there are a lot of projects that would be presented in these fields over the coming 2 days. Thank you. Your Excellency, the President, we would like to listen to your comment. It's not a comment, but it's rather expressing appreciation to Ms. Ursula and her team from the EU Commission. Thank you for all the efforts exerted over the previous 100 days, along with their Egyptian counterparts, this conference. So I would like to welcome her again and thank her for being here with us today. Thank you for the commitment and the seriousness and the efforts exerted during this period. I would like also to thank the Egyptian team. I would like to welcome all the European ministers and the European companies attending with us this meeting. In addition to all what was mentioned by the panelists about the economy and investment, I would like to tell you that there is another important point you need to know about Egypt. Egypt is not just a big market that has about 120 million with the refugees and the guests. I always call them guests. This is a huge market. And we have also great workforce. 70% of the population is below the age of 40. And this is very promising for any investor who wants to find the workforce. The other important thing I need to mention we need to look at the people. Who for 12 years was patient and looking forward to a better future. And this is the most important point I need to mention. The challenges Egypt faced in 2011 up till now are great. And this was a test that Egypt was able to succeed in. And this proves that it's not only the state institutions that were able to be successful, but it is also the will of the Egyptians who faced a lot of challenges. Even the challenges they were not responsible for, like, for example, COVID-19 and the Russian-Ukrainian war, Gaza war, that has economic adverse impacts on all economies. So, I would like to thank the Egyptians for their endurance, and this is the biggest guarantee for the local and foreign investors. And as mentioned, over the past 10 years, since 2014 up till today, we were keen on qualifying Egypt to have the infrastructure that enables real investment and real industry in different fields, be it, as mentioned, old economy or new economy. So I would like to tell all those participating with us in this conference and even those who are listening to us that we have a great opportunity to invest in Egypt, and we will exert all efforts to make these investments successful and to provide it with the attracting climate. Once more, I would like to thank the President of EU Commission. Thank you for your support. Thank you, Mr. President. At the end of this session, President Fattah al-Sisi, the President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, would you please give the opportunity to Ms. Ursula to say something?
Please. Thank you very much. This was, for me, fascinating to listen. And while I listened, I thought, well, Egypt and the European Union, the public sector, with its possibility, but also the private sector, with all the innovation and the capital power that is behind it. If we work closely together, we can move mountains. And this is amazing to see when I listen to all the fascinating details you were presenting. If you put that in a big picture, it also shows that we are not two different continents, but I would turn it the other way around. We are partners around the same Mediterranean shores. And this unites us. And therefore, I will not go back into the very important facts you have shown, but this knowledge, if every one of us contributes the best we can give, the potential is enormous. Enormous for the people we are serving, enormous for the young people that are looking for perspectives, for opportunities. And therefore, I see this as a mission that we all of us together have to fulfill for a better future of not only Egypt and the European Union, but mankind. And therefore, I'm very glad to be here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency Ursula von der Leyen. شكرا فخامة الرئيس عبد
Thank you,
الفتاح
Mr. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Thanks and appreciation to the panelists in this panel. Thank you, the guests of Egypt, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your due listening, and we'll continue with our agenda. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Osama. Thank you, all the panelists. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, the President of EU Commission. After the end of this session, we will start the ceremony of signing the Memorandum of Understanding between the Arab Republic of Egypt and the European Union on the first segment of the mechanism of supported macroeconomy by €1 billion from the Egyptian side, the Minister of International Cooperation, Rania Al-Mashat, and from the European side, Mr. Walders, the Executive Director of EU Commission for Trade. Mr. President, we'll take a short break and then we'll continue with the rest of the sessions of this conference. Thank you.
Egypt opens up to the world. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi meets with world leaders.
أعبر لكم عن خالص الشكر والتقدير على حفاوة الاستقبال وكرم الضيافة.
Reaffirming Egypt's vision, delivering our voice abroad.
لتطوير التعاون الثنائي الاقتصادي والعسكري إلى مستويات غير مسبوقة.
Discussing regional and international developments.